How's that there, Maria? All right, everyone. Happy Wednesday. Welcome to Understanding Insurance for Contract Workers in the NDIS. My name's Gina Ingram from Effective Policy, and we have with here.
But you've muted yourself.
For goodness sake. Welcome, everyone. Happy Wednesday. I'll start again because I was on mute. Uh, Happy Wednesday. Welcome to Understanding Insurance for Contract Workers in the NDIS. My name's Gina Ingram from Effective Policy. And for those of you who haven't met us yet, this is Alison Webb. She's the Operation Manager here at Effective Policy. So, yeah, lovely. What brought this one about is we just had a situation, I think, a week or two ago where somebody was really unsure about insurances. We were seeing some really unusual questions, and we thought it's perhaps time to do another one of these because it's really important to have your understanding of insurances to make sure that you're protected um, in the best way possible from all sorts of situations that can occur, which can ruin your business, ruin your life, ruin somebody else's life. So, without further ado, we will kick off. I just want to put it into PowerPoint mode. And there we go. Okay. So, as we said, now I always like to just check who's in, how many people in the room at the moment, Ali?
Three people.
Okay, three. So we haven't got everyone here. So I'm going to assume most people will watch this by recording. Um, so terrific. So let's just touch on why we're doing this. This is about NDIS contractors facing unique risks, the appropriate insurance being required under the NDIS practice standards. And you know what? Irrespective of the practice standards or the legislation, the fact is that it can ruin your life and ruin your business. What sort of insurances for employees? How's it different to the ones required for ABN workers? Looking at contract worker employee or contract worker versus employee, how to know the difference, what the difference in the insurances are between those two. Contractors who invoice you, um, they're not an employee. Okay. So that's something you have to be really, really clear about going forward. If somebody is invoicing you, they are not an employee. Okay, that's bottom line, absolute bottom line. If you're paying tax for them, PAYG, um, they are an employee. Okay, so we've got to be really clear about how do we differentiate? We differentiate because if you're being invoiced by somebody for their support work, they are not an employee. Okay, so we'll talk a bit about the must-have insurances, but there's a lot of nuance to that because there is no one size fits all for any organization. You are going to need different insurances according to your own situations. So we won't just talk about the contractors, we'll talk about the insurances as well for a business in general. Um, what I want to get really clear here is, and I'm hesitant to say it because I found that a lot of people will go off and try to do the least amount of possible as they can. But there is no single legislative instrument that mandates these specific insurance types for all the NDIS providers. There's too many of you doing too many different things. You'll never find something that says, for you, you got to do X, Y, Z, and for you, you have to do A, B, C. You're going to have to make those decisions based on the information in front of you or the questions you ask of others. So, what you're asked to do under the legislation for NDIS is to demonstrate that you have a governance obligation and it's being fulfilled. That isn't very clear. It's as clear as mud, I know, but that's because the legislation can't take responsibility for 360 different variations of NDIS providers. So it says, well, if your governance is intact and in place, You'll be figuring out what you need yourself. And they're not going to take responsibility if things go wrong for you, because it is on the business to figure out what insurances you needed. And if you didn't get the right ones and you end up in financial trouble, then it is still going to come down to being your responsibility. So it is that NDIS commission audit process that will look at the insurances you've got, but you've got to also remember there's several thousand auditors in this system, and they all will have different opinions. I found most of them to pretty what we get the feedback of these days when we see people's audits, etc. I find most of them to be pretty on track. I think that there are still a few people who don't really understand insurances because some of them never worked in business themselves and or ran. When I say that worked in business, I mean more come from the pre-NDIS sector where we had to be CEOs of organisations and we carried the risk. So we had to know what we were insured for. So they're okay. They're okay. I don't think they're the problem in the system, is I guess what I'm saying. One thing you can be sure of that is genuinely legislated is your workers' compensation. And that is the one sure insurance that you must have that is actually documented in a legislation. But it changes state by state. There are thresholds in a certain state that say you don't have to have it until you're paying out X amount of money in salary. So it is what you need to take away is workers' comp is legislated for employees, and that I need to check my state and see what their legislation differences are. The other thing that I would say is in terms of must-haves, it isn't determined by any other legislation, but what you're going to have to look at for yourselves is, and here's what the example I wanted to give you is, let's just say you're a SIL provider and you're going to start delivering in an SDA home. It depends if that SDA contract says that your SIL provider, the SIL provider must have XYZ legally, then you have to have XYZ. That's as good as the legislation because their contract is a legal document and it's saying that the SIL provider, for example, needs to have X, Y, and Z. If you don't have X, Y, and Z, if you didn't read that contract that the SDA provider gave you to allow you to use their SDA home for SIL, then you're the one that's responsible for that, not them. So the other thing that I would say is it is expected that you will, I mean, here's what you can pretty much depend on. It's expected you're going to have public liability. It's expected you're going to have professional indemnity. And if you have SIL homes or SDA homes, it would be pretty silly if you didn't have the dwelling insurance, or at least there is a dwelling insurance on that and you can claim on it. And public liability is always important from any government contract. It has always been a 20 million, well, for a long time, it's been a 20 million minimum. I don't know that there are any stated facts around what it should be in the NDIS. We can't find anything. I just revert back to the government contracts prior to NDIS, and they stated 20 million, no less. So it must be determined also by the services you provide. So I think if you've gone to an insurance broker and they've asked the right questions and you've given the right information, you'll come out with the right insurances, I would expect. But it's also good for you to be aware of what you need as well. Of course, your public liability insurance is what's going to protect you against people who slip or trip or hurt themselves in the course of your business. It will cover the legal fees if they sue you. It will cover compensation for that person. It will cover a member of the public or a supplier or, you know, anyone who's on your property. It's not for the employee because you're supposed to have other insurances for them. But I think there would be situations perhaps where public liability might kick in, but I won't speculate on that. But so the public liability is the biggest, and I think most people understand that's incredibly important. And one court case, probably one one court case could really burn up everything you have in your own home. So it's just not worth not having. So your examples, participants slipping and injuring in your business premises, employees damaging a client's property. So when it's public liability insurance for staff, this is where it won't cover your ABN contractor. Okay, so that is for your public, your employer staff, but it's not going to cover your contractor. Do you want to tell me why it doesn't cover your contractor? Does anyone want to hesitate, I guess? Why do you think it might not cover a independent contractor that invoices you?
Because they should have their own insurance.
Correct. That's right. Yeah, that's exactly right. Because they're independent and they're a business in and of themselves coming onto your property to do work. They're not an employee. Okay. So these policies won't pay them. So be really aware of that. I have seen in audit, I have seen some independent contractors have just gotten themselves public liability, and I've voiced that to the provider, letting them know that they are absolutely not covered. That employee is not covered at all if something from a public liability perspective happens to them. And in essence, the employer will be leaving themselves wide open. So it's not good for either party. It leaves, because when you're hurt and you haven't got the right insurance, you will try to claim, and unscrupulous, no win, no fee lawyers will always try to claim for someone. They'll claim in any way that they can. So although it might not be under public liability insurance, they may claim under a director, personally, because in essence, although we know, all right, these subcontractor, contractor, ABN contractors, they should know, but they don't know. A lot of them know now, but some of them don't, and some of them have been forced to be ABN contractors against their will. They want a job, they need a job, and the provider says, on a very high number of providers will say, no, we're only hiring, we're only using ABN contractors. And we know people that are doing that. And that would be seen to be coercion. That would bring everything that would just, all bets would be off, and the employer will be sued. But I doubt very much that your public liability insurer is going to pay, because that's a story that isn't going to go well for the provider. Okay, the story of coercing someone, or not withdrawing the job offer unless they are a sole, come in as a sole trader, it's not going to go down well. So either way it goes, it's just not going to end well for the provider. So be really careful about that as well. You see, public liability insurance typically doesn't cover these subcontractors, these support workers, and we're only talking about support worker subcontractors that are working for you under their ABM. There might be a time when you can negotiate that with your insurance company, but you would absolutely want to see that in writing before you'd want to make sure that it absolutely does cover these people who are subcontracting to you. I don't think I've seen one yet that has. So that's why they need to have their own insurance in place. It's not the biggest expense in the world. It's not that hard to have a package for a ABN employee, a support worker. It doesn't cost that much. But it is your job then to check the validity of everything they've given you and that it stays intact. So you would be doing exactly what you would do for your own insurance certificates and checking the dates that they're paid to, and having a reminder in your system to recheck when the date's falling due. It's not unusual for people to not pay their insurances on time.
There's a question in the chat from
Hmm.
Coraline. What about contractor allied health who are working under their own ABN?
Yeah. It is still the same. They still, if they're, remember what the bottom line was? If they're invoicing you, then they're a independent contractor. If they're an independent contractor, they're not covered under your insurance. Therefore, you have to make sure they've got all of their own in place, just like you do. Is there a specific situation or issue? No? Okay.
Yes, they do. I just wondered, as you stated, support workers.
Yeah, because that's the majority. Yeah. They take up the majority of the contract. I usually find that the allied health professionals, they're not subject to such coercion. There might be some coercion, but they're not really exposed to as much coercion and bullying as, say, the independent support workers who are working under an ABN and invoicing for their time. The allied health professionals are often a bit more savvy, and they know what they should have, and they're not going to be coerced so much. So that's probably why it does include them. What we're talking about includes them, anyone who's invoicing you, but they're not usually falling foul to being coerced into being ABN contractors. So your professional indemnity is really important, and especially for your support worker cohort, because the majority of them are not highly skilled, and they're not highly trained, and they're not highly qualified. So professional indemnity was never more important than it is now, because of all of the things that can go wrong, and do go wrong. So this is designed to protect claims of negligence or breach of duty, which happens so frequently. It's, I suppose, when it causes real harm is where it's going to go to a litigation situation. We can have negligence and incompetence and all of those things on a daily basis, but when the real harm happens, that's when the trouble starts. So making sure that theirs is always up to date. Minimum of, I've always said 5 million. I've seen people out there buying 2 million. I'm sort of, what's a few dollars and get 5 million. That's just my view. $1 million doesn't really go very far anymore, does it? You know what I mean? If somebody really injured a person. So I'm a bit more comfortable when it's 5 million. So and that would go for all workers, anyone invoicing you. Example, incorrect care advice, which leads to harm. More examples of that are support workers who fall in love with someone with an acquired brain injury and they're going to get married. So that's just lovely. All of these sorts of things, they can cause harm. That one isn't the most harm you could see the one I talked about, but that is negligence and coercion and abuse and, causing damage to that gentleman, by getting into a relationship with them. But we have ones where there's real harm, and that's giving the wrong medications or not putting particular safety restraints, etc., on people. I'm sure you've heard, some of the bad and awful and bad things that happen. I mean, Anne Marie is of course the prime example of that, but there are plenty of other people who have suffered as well. So that's your professional indemnity. And I think, like I said, it's never been more important than when you hire a support worker as an independent in this market. Miscommunication resulting in complaints or financial losses. Your staff, they're covered under yours. So making sure that you've got enough. I mean, I didn't really touch much on that because they're covered under yours as an employee. But your contractors, not. So making sure they all have their own. So, we've gone public liability, we've gone professional indemnity, they're two non-negotiables. But always check the validity. Do check how much they've got. I think if they come to you with 1 million in professional indemnity, that's not much. If someone gets really, really hurt, that's not much. I've always gone for 5 million. I've seen some people say, oh, 2 million's fine. I just don't think so. I think 5 million for the sake of a few dollars. So it's those nuances that you need to keep your eye on. So accident insurances. Now, these are really for your ADN contractor support workers. So it was quite a shock to the entire when the standards came out and this contracting business started to sort of really hype up, but they can have an accident. Now, what happens in the world is, sure, they say, oh, no, if I have an accident, that's my problem. It's not. When it comes time and they've had their accident, they're going to sue whoever they can sue. And if they can't get it through your insurance, and they won't because your insurer won't pay, then they can't get it through workers' comp. They will never get it through your public liability because your insurer doesn't want to pay that either, remember. They're going to try and get it from you. And every no win, no fee person is going to, they're going to have a go. And even if let's say they didn't win, they're going to drain you of every cent you've got, taking you to court. And it's not going to cost them a cent because it's a no win, no fee. And those lawyers are going to try so damn hard because they usually only take on something that they've got a fairly good chance of prosecuting. And harm through accidents and mishaps is got a pretty strong history of having success. So it is about you. It's not about them. It is about them as well, but we're talking about you guys as providers, or if you are a subcontractor yourself, support worker, thinking about where it leaves you want to be protected as well. I'm not saying that every time a NDIS support worker who doesn't have public liability insurance or professional indemnity or accident insurance, I'm not saying every time they don't have that, they're going to be successful in suing the provider. But whether they're successful in suing the provider, because most likely the finding will be you should have had your accident insurance and you didn't. But guess how much it's cost yourself as a provider to prosecute that? A lot of money. That's a lot of money. And sure, you might have won in the end, but after $200,000 in legal fees, it's not worth it. For checking that you don't have any subcontractor support workers who don't have accident insurance. And that goes for your allied health professions as well. And if you are the worker yourself, have it. It's not worth it. You can go through that court case and have it turned down. It's not worth it for a package that will cost you all of about $80 to $100 a month. It's just not worth it. So yeah, you get your personal accident insurance. Now, when we first started out in this, it didn't exist. They have really created this because of the NDIS workforce. Back in the beginning, we were struggling to find, we would be saying to people, well, you're going to need to draw on the fact that you've got put accident insurance or a much heavier insurance element into your superannuation that you have, because they always have people have usually got a superannuation. And then suddenly, a year into the standards or so, up pops this accident insurance product with all of the insurers, which is good. Yeah, so your accident insurance, it's for personal accidents. Yep. It offers a payout when people experience injury or death due to an accident. A bit like your TPD, which comes with your superannuation, except the TPD has to be that you cannot work anymore in that industry. And accident insurance doesn't have a baseline of you cannot work in this industry. It is you've hurt yourself, and we'll give you that commensurate kind of payout based on how much you've hurt yourself. So it's nice not to have to draw on your TPD in your super unless you absolutely have to. But I would also warn sole trader support workers to make sure that they've got a good amount in their superannuation. And if all they're doing is invoicing people and they have no employee job, I would tell them to take out their own super, because it's just good information for them, to not have them spend the next 10 years contracting, having a wonderful time contracting people, no boss, really, they can work when they want, if they want, but not have any super, not a good idea. So with there was a company that was allowing all of their workers to be under their workers' comp. But I did look at the wording. I did speak to brokers because I just didn't believe it. And I did not see anything in that workers' compensation cover that explicitly said that it could cover a ABN contracted worker. And I'm hearing a bit more since then about people saying that their ABN contractor workers are covered under their workers' comp. I would be very, very wary of that, because workers' compensation has never been meant to cover anyone other than a PAYG employee. And if you can't see that in writing, and I did not see it in their contract, then I wouldn't trust that they would go through with it. I just wouldn't. It has to be in writing. Who it insures is the most basic thing in an insurance policy. Who does this insure? And in these people's, it was a big allied health company in Sydney with lots of support workers and lots of allied health, and they had about 100 staff. And I saw nothing in there that said in the who it insures that it was also contracted. So I would be very, very careful of that. Yeah, so I'm sure you probably all know what accident insurance does. It is the personalised version of the workers' comp, I guess. Covers employees for their work-related injuries, illnesses, medical expenses, rehab, and lost wages. It really is that sole trader version of a workers' compensation. What I think we've already covered that. What covers is your injuries when you're unable to work. And we're doing this because it's the right thing to do for the person that we want to work for us, via ABN, but we're also doing it so we protect ourselves as an organisation and an individual, that we don't get sued if anything goes wrong with them. And we're also doing it so we don't feel bad if that happens to them. That's not a nice place to be either. Does anyone know whereabouts on the hazardous? There's a list of not professions, job types, and the workers' compensation data, it shapes which ones are the most dangerous. Does anyone know where? And if you've heard me before, you'll probably have heard this, but does anyone know what number NDIS support work sits in on that list of the most dangerous in Australia? Go on, have a go. Nobody want to have a go? Okay, it's number 2. So it's the second most dangerous industry to work in, based on the workers' compensation statistics over the last several years. And the only one in front of it is bricklaying. So that kind of should give you the impetus to really make sure that you support your organisation, ensure that you have very clear rules with your ABN contractors, that you don't want to accept them unless they have all of these things, because you don't A, want to carry their liability, or B, see them come to harm and become someone dependent on the system and ruin their life. And the other thing is too that it's just the right thing to do. So I think we've been through this always. Like, I think as equally important as making sure you or others have insurance, it is 50% of the weight of that compliance action and protective action is to check its validity on a very regular, scheduled basis. Because the amounts of people, and we've spent 4 or 5 years, however many years it is, Ali, it keeps changing every time I say that, doesn't it? However many years we've been working together, me and Ali, we have been seeing people who have not checked people's insurances, not checked their licenses. And it is really common for people's licenses and registrations to expire. That's another part. We'll be getting to the next insurance too. Do you know what can happen to you as a provider if somebody's license or registration expires and they have an accident?
And if I can just jump in as well, some providers I've spoken to have said, yes, we check our contractor insurances at the start of every year, which obviously doesn't work because, if their insurance says it's going to expire in June, then from June to December, you're just hoping that they've renewed it. So you need to
That's not right.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh my gosh, you didn't tell me that one. Yeah, I mean, look, it's a really good intention for everyone listening now and listening, via the recording. It's a really good intention, but it's an intention that will fail you. So what you have to have is every single document has an expiry date, and that is the date that you will recheck to see if they have a new number for you. Okay. That's what's important. So we usually say flag it 5 days before. Our system, because we have a compliance management system, because this is sounds really boring, I know, but this is the stuff we really love. I didn't love this when I was a worker, like on the floor in rehabs and stuff like that. But when I became a CEO and it was my responsibility and the buck stopped with me, I suddenly developed quite a love for all of this because I didn't want to be held responsible. I didn't want to be the captain of a ship that got slapped with an enormous lawsuit either. So we would flag, I suggest you flag a due date for a license or a renew or a registration or insurance or APRA registrations. And please don't think that people don't forget to do their APRA registrations, because they do. All of these things, they forget. I have forgotten to do my license. I have forgotten to do my registration and have been horrified to see something come in and go, oh my God, I've been driving and this and that, and I've had no coverage. Like, it happens to the best of us. It'll definitely happen to the people who don't really give a damn. Okay, so you must have it. So we say, we've got a formula in our compliance management system, Ellie, and have we got it on 2 weeks or 3 weeks?
It's on 4 weeks, actually.
Right. So we flag before 4 weeks and it will continue to remind you. So I don't know if you know, but we've built a compliance management system, which is for NDIS providers and aged care providers. It could be for anyone, but it's more suited for NDIS and aged care providers so that we can flag all these things because they are the nuts and bolts of protecting your business. And if you ever want to have a demo of that system, please just reach out to Ali. She's the Uber expert on our compliance management system. And for that reason, that we love this stuff. We love to make sure that it's safe, that we've got everything working, that people don't have to work hard to make sure their compliances are in place. You know, we need to make sure that people can see from above, from a helicopter view, what is going on in their business regarding risks, governance, checks, all of that stuff. So I think we've covered off on what we know contractors, support worker contractors need to have for you. They need to have public liability, they need to have professional indemnity, and they need to have accident insurance to protect them and to make sure that there's no reason for them to come back at you if they're harmed in doing their job. Okay. So now I want to come to the other thing that people forget about. Here's the most common thing that people forget about. Number one, vehicle insurance. If your support worker or allied health professional or anyone else isn't covered under the business type, right, in terms of their personal or business when you insure, and there's personal and business on your registration renewal, if they haven't said business on their registration, then, and I know it costs more, but if they haven't said business on that and their third-party insurance, if you're in New South Wales and in any other state that splits up the rego, like that, and on their comprehensive insurance, if they haven't said that they're a business, they can't claim on it. And my fear is, okay, there's one part that says, well, I'll feel a bit sorry for you if that happens to you. The other part says, I don't want you coming back at me. Yeah. So there's two parts to that. So one, if it were only about them and they'd be so silly as to do that, then that's one thing. But if they were coerced into being an ABN contractor against their will and they didn't want to be one, but they couldn't get a job unless they were, they would have a case against the provider, if that can be proved. But also, they'll come back at you. They'll find any way they can to come back at you, and your insurance will probably say no. And that means it will fall on you. It will come out of your pocket. So these things are incredibly important. So vehicle insurances, remember, must say business use on the registration, and it must say business use on the third-party insurance if you're in New South Wales and other states that do that separately now. And it must say business use on any insurance they take independent to that. Now, if they're only taking third-party property insurance, that's up to them, but they need to know, and you need to make it clear, well, we're not responsible if you damage your own car. So knowing those things is really important. They're hidden, they're very hidden items that people don't really think about. People hand over their regos, they hand over their insurances, and you will find 95% of the time they'll have a third-party insurance on their vehicle. I don't mean the third-party insurance for the person, which is part of the rego in New South Wales. I mean, they'll just have third-party property damage, which means if they hit somebody else, they're covered. They won't have one if someone's hit them, and that's silly. And the only thing that opens up for me, and always has, is, are they going to come back at me because they were working for me doing that job? So the other thing, then they'll come back at you and they'll say, and you, there may be some contractors listening to this themselves, but you can't go back at an organisation and go, it's not worth insuring, because you know what my comment to, if your car's not worth insuring, do you want to guess what my comment to that is?
Not safe to drive.
Might not be, but would you really put a paying customer in a car that equates to a car that is not worth insuring? I wouldn't allow somebody to get in a car if it's that old and not worth insuring. I don't think it's fair that people pay fees to be cared for and get in a 20-year-old car that has an exhaust pipe like a foghorn. I think there needs to be certain standards, but that's up to everybody. But it's the safety of your business that is sort of relevant here.
There's a question in the chat.
Yeah.
So from Karen, so staff that have comprehensive insurance, do they need to pay for the business insurance, or is it up to the provider to pay for that business insurance on the comprehensive?
Yeah, sorry, I just wanted to know how that works.
Yeah. So when you get insurance, that will ask when you register your car or when you get insurance, it's going to ask you if it's for business or private. And of course, they're going to charge more for the business one. They are supposed to pay for it themselves, but I know businesses who, for example, will pay for that part themselves, like they'll give them the difference.
Right. So a provider can say, if you do the business, I'll pay the difference.
Yeah. And that way, because you know what that does? That just makes my anxiety just go way, way down, the fact that they've got business. Because if they haven't said their business and they try and make a claim, what's the chance they're going to come back at you? Every chance,
And there's one other question. Sorry for interrupting.
No. Fine.
Okay, so a client's got their own car, their license, and wants to drive the staff around. I've got a document that all staff have signed under no circumstance, because some of them I know don't have comprehensive insurance. So am I doing the wrong thing not letting my staff hop in a car with a client driving?
Not letting them, no. I thought, if you were letting them, I
won't let them. I just say it's our policy that this is what the staff have signed. So
you don't even know unless you've got that person's license. Do you know what I mean? Insurance, the same deal. No, say no, you can't.
No, so that's one of my policies, that I won't let them.
No, but you know what? If it were one of those things too, from a person-centered perspective, if it were one of those things that this is actually part of one of the protocols or one of the strategies, or it's if it were, then you could collect that information.
Yes. Yeah.
Makes sense.
No,
and
I
a
just
very good question. Yeah,
I just thought, yeah, so I made up a policy when it happened a couple of years ago.
I think
And
that's great.
yeah,
Yeah.
so that kind of, yeah, I think, well, I just wanted to ask a question. It does cover me, of course, doesn't it?
Yes, yes, and I do think that even if it's the person's, um, if they're your staff, even if it's the participant's father or mother or anyone, I mean, getting into somebody else's car when
Yes,
they're
of
on
course.
your time is a problem, because what that would to do that would negate the purpose of why you collected the support workers' credentials in the first place, wouldn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because
Yes.
the buck's going to stop with you. Like, that was the
Okay.
really frightening part of being a CEO in the not-for-profit sector. That's it. I'm the end of the line. I couldn't start blaming everybody else, which was
But
just,
you definitely need business insurance, the staff do.
uh, oh, if yeah, look,
If they're
no
driving
claim.
participants around,
Yep,
they need, because I do know in the
and it can be
past it hasn't.
partial. It can be partial. There are some that just go, well, is it personal use or business use, and you have to pick one or the other, or you can have both. And sometimes they'll say, is it 60% or 80%? Do
Oh,
you know what I mean?
okay, yes.
Yeah, but
Yes.
not all of them do that, but some of them do, because they're really aware that people use their car for business. And as this,
Yeah, of
I mean,
course.
this sector and
Mm,
has changed the insurance landscape and other landscapes, just like Uber changed things when it came in. You know,
yes.
we, Uber broke the law for a really long time and paid all the fees for it, and then the law changed to accommodate Uber, and like NDIS came in, and it to do the job, people were breaking the law and putting themselves at risk, and then things have changed and caught up, which is why we now have personal accident insurance for people. Never existed when I first was an NDIS auditor. Didn't exist in 2019. Now it does. So it's bringing all these products are coming in, and I expect now that you'll see, and I'm pretty sure I've seen it anyway, but I expect now that you'll see there's a partial percentage that you can say in some insurers about what percentage your car is of business and what percentage it's personal. So
Yeah.
it has changed to accommodate, you know,
Okay, thank you for that.
that's okay. That's okay. So yeah, so vehicles, I think they're about the most important things. But I will say, I will say, no, this sounds really superficial, but it's not to me. Is that if their car isn't worth insuring, then they're either lying, or the car is so bad that nobody should be taking a paying participant in that car. Like, I don't know if you've seen some participants, some support workers' cars. They're really bad. I wouldn't. I wouldn't. Nobody deserves to get into one of those cars. So, this isn't about insurance, but I'll then say, every one of you that has a participant driving a car, of their own or yours, are you doing vehicle inspections on them once a month? Probably no. So when we actually, Ali, what I'll get you to do is send out the vehicle inspection form,
Yeah.
and so just send them. It's not mandated under the NDIS. I wrote this independent to what we had to write for NDIS providers under the standards, but just send them out the vehicle policy as well. And eventually, with our compliance management system, we're looking to get an API written. We want to be able to draw the data from each of the states' licensing and registration databases, so that people will actually get alerted when somebody's license or registration is expiring. That's our next one of our next projects with our software. But that's definitely what I used to manage. Uber, not Uber, but like it's called Point to Point in New South Wales. I used to manage a point to point transport business of my own, and I learned a lot about the transport sector. Um, and may I also say, if you are providing transport for people, I would actually, under your own states, I would register as a transport provider, We call it a point-to-point in New South Wales. It's called something else in Queensland and something else, in every state. But that registration, which I think you'll pay like $500 a month, not a month, a year, something like that. It makes you an Uber. Basically, it makes you an Uber. But the better part of that is it means that you have a dashboard where everyone's licenses and registrations and demerit points are there for you to see. And I loved that. And that's why I want to integrate with all of the statewide dashboards. But it also opens up another business opportunity for you as well, because then you can provide formal point-to-point services for your customers as well. You don't have to charge what Uber charges. You can charge whatever whatever suits you to charge. But anyway, that's another thing. But it's sort of just a bit of a segue from the insurance part. So there we go. We've talked about that. I've talked about all of those things. So your simple rule of thumb for insurances is that everyone must be covered by the different types of insurances. And if they aren't covered under the business insurance, then they'll need their own. So if your insurance can't cover them, then they need their own for that. And there's 3 areas. So you've got public liability, someone getting hurt in something that they're doing for you while they're working for you. Professional indemnity, something that they do to somebody because they got it wrong in the line of their job, and then them getting hurt on the job because there is no workers' comp that applies to them as a worker. Unless workers' comp comes around as well, like I just told you, the majority of the insurers came around and suddenly started offering a personal injury and accident policy. Unless workers' comp comes around, but they probably won't. We're still stuck with, well, yeah, okay, where do we, people who think that their staff are covered by workers' comp and their ABN contractors will probably get a really rude surprise if they try to make a claim. Now, there are lots of different types of insurances. And like I said, there is no one size fits all. And it's quite sad just to see everybody taking the one size. But things are emerging as years go on. But here is a little assessment for you. I would have to go to that document. I have to, I know I opened it. Where? It's a Word document. Oh, here it is. Beautiful. Thanks, Ali. So this is a little bit of an assessment, and I'll get Ali to send this out too. So indicate whether each type of insurance is relevant to your business. So you can just do a bit of an assessment here. So you've got public liability and professional indemnity, workers' compensation, management liability. As an organisation, I wouldn't be without management liability. I would these days be taking something that has cyber liability. You might have a fleet of cars, you might not. Your personal accident, I would give this to your subcontract workers, your sole trader workers, and get them to complete it too and get a copy of it, or even sit down with them and go through it with them. Your product liability, for us, for example, product liability, we have a software, we have policies, we have product liability. Business interruption, who wouldn't want that? The key person, not a bad idea, especially if you think, my God, they might do something wrong. Why not have it? Contract works, if you're an SDA maybe, or still doing, something or other. Clinical malpractice, passenger liability, employers' liability, directors and officers, employment practices, statutory liabilities, that's breaking some government laws, tax audit insurance, not for you. Office bearers, much the same as management liability, but office bearers is more about the directors. Crime insurance, someone steals, theft and burglary, maybe in a still house. Glass insurance, well, that's like for businesses that have those massive, big, they cost thousands and thousands of dollars to replace those big glass panels in their workplaces. Machinery breakdown, electronic equipment, portable equipment, transit insurance, marine cargo, umbrella, pollution, medical malpractice, aged care liability, event insurance, corporate travel, income protection, life insurances, total TPD. That's part of your what do you call it? Superannuation usually. But I think you can get it separately too. Trade credit, no, it's not relevant. Intellectual property, media liability, privacy liability, network security, SDA property insurance, landlord insurance, strata insurance, home and contents. So that's an exhaustive list, a good one to consider, and you can figure out which ones you need and which ones you don't, and then just remember to ask your broker. And some of your products, they can just sort of put packages together that have different insurances in them. So that really concludes our presentation. I will just pop back to where's that PowerPoint, Alice? It was in here. Popping back to here, just finalizing. So just remembering, and I think I've iterated this all the way through, you're personally responsible for your coverage as a sole trader or a contractor, explicitly, unless you're told otherwise by the business. And even then, like I said, there was that business that was saying that they're covering people's workers' comp, and I saw nothing in their workers' comp paperwork that said it covers anyone than paid employees. So I felt like it was a broker saying they were, but it wouldn't have been enough for me to take that as verbatim. And number two, you've got minimum requirements, figure out what they are, and then make sure that your assurance aligns to that. And number three, underinsurance is your major risk. It's just not worth it. And isn't it always the way, it's when somebody's driver's license expires that they get pulled over by a police officer, That's just the way it happens. So that concludes for today. Are there any other questions that anyone would like to ask? No? All right. Well, thank you very much for coming along. And I hope that you gain something from that. If you want to touch base with us, we're at effectivepolicy.com.au.
Thank you.
Pleasure. Thanks, everyone.